The next section of the chapter here, Imam Qudama, he begins with the prayer, obviously purification and then prayer. We're still in the section of ritual acts of devotion or worship. And he says that the prayer is the pillar of faith. It's the support of faith. Basically, without prayer, faith will be lost. And it is the pinnacle of obedience. And there's been numerous things that have been mentioned about the virtues of prayer. Many different narrations, very well known and famous. And the best of those things, or the best manners of prayer, or what you want to try and obtain in the prayer, is al-khushu', which is a reverential awe and fear of Allah subhanahu. To develop a level of khushu'. And take note of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says that prayer is kabira, is tough, it's difficult. Illa ala al-khashi'in, except for those that have khushu' in their prayer. So Ramadan is a great gauge. It's a great litmus test for yourself, and then for everyone around us, the community. If you look at Taraweeh, for example, we're praying right now 8 raka'at, and then later in the night we're praying another 8 or whatever, 13, whatever it may be, or depending on whatever program. So the 8 raka'at, they take 45 minutes to an hour, including Salat al-Isha. So if you're going in for 2 and it's just, I gotta leave, I step back, I gotta go home, I'm tired, or you stay for 4 and you bounce because it feels like you stood forever, you stay for 6, or you're unable to complete the program, a lot of times it's because your prayer lacks khushu'. It's difficult. And that's what Allah says. It's difficult unless you have developed khushu' in the prayer. And so this is a good litmus test to see where you stand in regards to prayer. Is it something very difficult? And he points out a number of things here that are extremely powerful. But before we get to some of the things that are going to help develop khushu' in the prayer, a couple of the virtues of prayer rewards. It was mentioned by Uthman radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that there is no one that prepares for prayer, the obligatory prayer, and they perfect their wudu, their purification, and they perfect their khushu', which is their humility in prayer, and then of course the ruku', their bowing, except that it will be an expiation for what has preceded of sins, so long as they did not engage in a major sin. And this is something that happens throughout the entire year, not just Ramadan, these special days. The Prophet ﷺ said, Man qama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaba, whoever stands in prayer during Ramadan in good faith and taking account their reward, غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, they'll be pardoned of their previous sins. Here this hadith is open, not specific to Ramadan. That if you get ready for prayer, you make your wudu well, you obtain a level of khushu' in the prayer that's admirable, and then you perfect the mechanics, the ruku' and the sujood, etc., then it will be an expiation for the previous sins, so long as you do not indulge in major sins. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever prays rak'atayn, la yuhaddithu fihima nafsah, whoever prays 2 rak'ahs, and they're not carrying on with themselves in the prayer like an internal dialogue, or they're being distracted by their thoughts, just for 2 rak'ahs, غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, he'll be pardoned of his previous sins. A little bit of a challenge. It's not something it's easier said than done, in all honesty. Another, Ibn al-Zubayr, it was said that Ibn Zubayr, who was Abdullah ibn Zubayr, radiyallahu anhuma, from the companions, he said when he stood for prayer, it was like he was a body of khushu', of awe. He would make sujood, and the sparrows, they would land on his back. the little birdies. The birdies would land on his back because he was so still in prayer, thinking that he was like a wall, like he was the base of a wall. It was also some of the later generations after that. Maymun ibn Mahran was a faqih from the judges of Furatiyah, which was the island in, it was like a little island, I think, in Iraq during the time of the dynasty there. He was one of the judges during that time, and he was employed by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as one of his judges and managers of the kharaj, which was the land tax, if you will. He said, I never saw another named Muslim ibn Yasar, who was also a great scholar of that time from the Umayyas. He was a scholar of hadith and originally from Mecca. He lived in Basra and he was the mufti of that area. He says, I never saw him multafitan in the prayer. He'd never fidget or look around in the prayer. He says, one of the walls of the masjid collapsed. And everyone in the market, because you know the masjid was there and the marketplaces around. He says when the wall collapsed, everyone in the market got all bugged out and like stopped what they're doing and focused on the wall. And inside the masjid was Muslim ibn Yasar praying and didn't even glance or turn. It's as if he didn't even notice that it happened. He says, كان أهل بيته إذا دخل المنزل سكتوا. Whenever he would go home, people of his home, they would be quiet. The man's home, dad's home, and everyone would stop talking, they'd be quiet. Then they said, فَإِذَا قَامَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ تَكَلَّمُوا وَضَحِكُوا. Says if he started to pray, they'd start talking and they'd start laughing. Because they knew that when he was in prayer, he was out of the world. Yeah, it was as if he's not there. That is the level of khushu' that they would have, the righteous have in their prayer, to the point that we struggle with this a great deal, and that's what we've been focused on, is getting the kids to stop playing and getting everyone to join the prayer and not having the phones on and all the distractions. But and there's something to be said about respecting worship, but there's a much deeper problem here, and that is we are so easily distracted. We're so easily distracted from prayer. While we're standing in there, the slightest little thing can throw you off to the point you forget where you are. So obviously, those that are able to achieve this level of khushu' in the prayer, there is something special to be said about them, and that's why the Imam here is mentioning a number of these narrations. It was mentioned Ali ibn Hussein, radiallahu anhuma, he made wudu. Whenever he would make wudu, the color of his face would change, become like red. And so someone asked him, what's got you thinking in your wudu? What is it that you're thinking about? They could see. And he says, أَتَدْرُونَ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ مَنْ أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَقُومُ? Do you know who it is I want to stand in front of? Do you know who it is that I intend to go and stand in front of? Meaning he's going to go stand in front of Allah. So when he's making wudu, he's already getting into the zone. When he's making wudu, he's already thinking about what he's about to do and how important and how powerful that moment is. So the development of khushu' begins much before the prayer actually begins. Right? So to imagine that you're going to just step into the prayer and have khushu' without having primed yourself for it is setting yourself up for failure. Right? So to develop khushu' is something that you have to build up to. And it starts from when you make wudu. It starts from when you leave the home and begin working your way to the masjid. It starts even before that with the life you're living. If you're living a life of sin, you can't expect that khushu' will be there for you, because khushu' is a gift from Allah. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He's in control of the hearts. And the people of paradise are those that stand in prayer khashi'in lillah. They have fear of Allah. They have awe of Allah. They have reverence. Those are the qualities of the people of paradise, and those qualities are not bestowed upon anyone. Those qualities are not bestowed upon anyone of this world, but they're bestowed upon those that Allah chooses, those of His obedient servants. He will bless you with those qualities, so that when you're in prayer, there could be a tornado going on, and you're in paradise. He says a couple of things. The prayer's obligations and their sunnah. And its spirit is the intention, as well as sincerity, khushu', hudur al-qalb, that your heart is present. He says the prayer is comprised of various different supplications and a discourse, a dialogue between you and Allah. There's actions as well, the various things that you do and movements. He says if your heart is not present, then you will not attain the objective with the adhkar and al-munajat, the various supplications and remembrances, as well as that discourse. It'll just be talking. He says if the words, if the utterances don't match what's in the soul, then it's like a delirious person who's just carrying on. Sometimes you'll see that. Especially if you start going into the city where you find people, they're without shelter, they're homeless, they have some challenges in their life, and they're just walking around talking to themselves, or just, even sometimes we get a little bit worried. Someone's just carrying on as if they're delirious. Imagine that's what he's talking about here, is someone that's standing in prayer and they're just talking, but it doesn't match what's in here. They just mindlessly uttering things, like you find that person that's just mindlessly going on out and about. So if the words don't match what's in the heart, then this is the case. Also the same thing with the actions. If they don't match what's in the heart, meaning, for example, he says the objective behind standing in prayer is khidmah. Right? Service to Allah. And the objective behind bowing and prostrating is submission, surrender. It's belittling yourself and glorifying Allah. And if the heart's not present, then you can't attain that objective. If your heart's not there, you're not going to humble yourself before Allah. You're just doing yoga. You're just doing some physical activity, stretching out. That's it. The desired objective will be lost. And the desired objective is to humble yourself and to glorify Allah. He says, similar to the remaining parts of the prayer, if the objective is not met, then it's just actions and words that are said that have no real point behind them. He mentions a verse in the Quran. He says, لا ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم. That it's not the meat or the blood that gets to Allah. Talking about the sacrificial animal, that when you slaughter the animal for Allah, like the qurbani, it's not the blood and the meat of that animal that gets to Allah, but it is the taqwa from you. Right? That's an act of piety. Imagine if you just go slaughter the animal without the piety, without the consciousness, without the awareness. The physical elements of it all, they're meaningless without the inner dimension of it. It says here, the intent here is that there is this connection between you and Allah. And the connection between you and Allah is the quality which conquers your heart. It's the qualities that overcome your heart. What are those qualities? Those qualities are glorification of Allah. Those qualities are awe and fear and submission and surrendering. Those are the qualities that, if they overcome the heart, then that is what is going to connect you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's an absolute must that your heart be present in your prayer. And of course, the legislator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has pardoned us in unexpected moments of heedlessness. And this is from the mercy of Allah. You couldn't expect, or it's difficult to expect that everyone would be able to maintain khushu' from the beginning to the end. But they would at least start their prayer in a mindful state. They would at least start their prayer with an intention and with purity of heart. Allahu Akbar. And the Allahu Akbar is Allah is greater than everything. Allah is greater than me. Allah is greater than this world. Allah is greater than my problems. Allah is greater than my wife, my husband, my children. Allah is greater than the debt that I owe. Allah is greater than the sickness that I'm feeling. So that a person is now fixated and focused on Allah. At least they start that way. And if in the prayer they have a momentary lapse or they lose themselves, even if it's extensive, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pardon us for that, and will at least the prayer will not be rendered void.